Verse for opening a sutra. The unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of aeons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. The wonderful Dharma, Lotus Flower Sutra, Belief and Understanding, Chapter 4. At that time, Mahakāshyapa, wishing to restate this meaning, spoke verses saying, We, on this day, hearing the sound of the Buddha's teaching, jumped for joy, gaining what we never had. The Buddha says that hearers shall become Buddhas in the future. A cluster of supreme gems we have gained without our seeking. It is like a youth who, young and ignorant, ran away from his father to a distant land, roaming from country to country for 50 years and more. His father, worried about him, sought him in the 4 directions. Until tired of the search, he stopped in a certain city, where he built himself a house and amused himself with the 5 desires. His household was large and wealthy, with much gold and silver, mother of pearl, carnelian, real pearls, and lapis lazuli, elephants, horses, cattle, and sheep, hand-drawn carts, palanquins, and chariots, husbandmen and servants, and a multitude of subjects. The profits from his trade extended to the other countries. Traders and merchants were present everywhere. Multitudes in the hundreds of millions surrounded him reverently, and always by kings he was cherished and remembered. The ministers and noble clans all honored him. For these reasons, those who came and went were many. Such was his nobility, wealth, and his great authority. But then, as he grew old and decrepit, he was filled with worry for his son. Morning and evening, his only thought was, My time of death is drawing near. My foolish son has left me now. For over 50 years, the things in my granaries and storehouses, whatever shall I do with them? Then the poor son, seeking clothing and food, went from city to city, from country to country, sometimes getting something, sometimes getting nothing. Starving and emaciated, covered with scabs, he went on his way until eventually he arrived in the city where his father lived. Hiring himself out along the way, he finally reached his father's house. At that time, the elder, within his gateway, was covered by a large canopy and seated on a lion throne, surrounded by his retinue and various attendants. Some of them were counting up his gold, silver, and other valuables. His income and expenses were recorded there on ledgers. When the poor son saw his father of such nobility and wealth, he said, This must be a king, or the equal of a king. In fright, he reproved himself, Why have I come here? And further to himself he said, If I stay here long, I may be oppressed and forced to go to work. Having had this thought, he hurriedly ran off to a poor village asking to be hired to work. Just then, the elder, sitting on the lion throne, saw his sons at a distance and silently recognized him. He then commanded his attendants to seize him and bring him back. The poor son cried out in alarm and fainted, falling to the ground. These people have caught me. I shall certainly be killed. Why, for food and clothing's sake, did I come to this place? The elder knew that his son was foolish and lowly. He wouldn't believe me if I told him. He wouldn't believe that I'm his father. He then used an expedient and sent some other men, one-eyed, squat and ugly, lacking awesome virtue. Speak to him, he said, and tell him, You will work with us, getting rid of dung and filth. at twice your normal wages." When the poor son heard this, he happily followed them back and swept out the dung and filth, cleaning all the dwellings. From his window, the elder would often watch his son, remembering that he was foolish and lowly and enjoyed menial work. Then the elder put on a worn and dirty robe, and holding a dung shovel, went to where his son was. Expediently drawing near to him, he said, "Work with diligence, for I have increased your wages, and shall give you oil for your feet, and your fill of food and drink, and thick warm bedding." Thus he spoke sharply, saying, "You must work hard." And then in gentler tones he added, "You are like my own son." The elder, in his wisdom, eventually allowed him to come and go. For a period of 20 years, he was put in charge of household business. He showed him his gold, silver, real pearls, and crystal. The income and expense of all these things he was caused to know. And yet the son still lived outside the gate, dwelling in a grass hut, thinking of his poverty. "None of these things are mine." The father knew his son's mind gradually had expanded, and wishing to give him wealth, he gathered together his relatives, the kings and great ministers, the kshatriyas and lay people. In the midst of this great assembly, he said, "This is my son. He left me and went away 50 years ago, and it has been 20 years since I saw him return. Long ago, in a certain city, I lost my son. Searching for him everywhere, I came to this place. Everything that I own, my houses and servants, I bequeath it all to him, that he may use it as he pleases." The son, recalling his former poverty and his lowly intentions, who now, in his father's presence, had obtained these precious jewels and these dwelling places and all such wealth, greatly rejoiced, having gained what he had never had. The Buddha, in the same way, knew our fondness for the petty, and so he never said to us, "You shall become Buddhas." Instead, he said that we could attain cessation of all outflows, realize the lesser vehicle, and become hero disciples. The Buddha has instructed us to speak of the unsurpassed path, and spoken of those who practice it as being able to accomplish Buddhahood. Receiving the Buddha's teaching, we, for the sake of the great bodhisattvas, use as causes and conditions various analogies and numerous expressions to speak of the unsurpassed path. All the Buddha's disciples, having heard from us this Dharma, think upon it day and night, and diligently practice it. Thereupon, all the Buddhas then bestow predictions upon them, saying, "You, in future age, shall become Buddhas." This is the secret store of Dharma of all the Buddhas. Only for the bodhisattvas are such real matters set forth, and not for our sakes have such true essentials been spoken. Just as the poor son drew near his father, although he knew of all his possessions, in his heart he held no hope of getting them. In just the same way, even though we have spoken of the Buddha Dharma's precious store, we personally never aspired to it. Having attained inner extinction, we thought this sufficient, for having completed this, there was nothing else to be done. And even if we had heard of purifying Buddha lands and teaching and transforming living beings, we would have taken no delight therein. And for what reason? All dharmas are completely empty and still, neither produced nor destroyed, neither great nor small, without outflows and unconditioned. Reflecting in this way, we did not give rise to joy. During the long night, we had no craving or attachment for the Buddha's wisdom, nor did we aspire to it. Yet as to Dharma, we claimed we had the ultimate. All through the long night, we practiced and cultivated the Dharma of emptiness. Having won release from the triple world, with its suffering, distress, and calamities, we dwell within our final bodies, in nirvana with residue. According to the Buddha's teaching, we attain the way which is not false, and we assume that we had thereby repaid the Buddha's kindness. Although we, for the sake of the Buddha's disciples, spoke of the Bodhisattva's Dharma, with which they should seek Buddhahood, still, in this Dharma, we never took delight at all. Our Master saw this and let things be, because he saw into our hearts, and so at first he did not encourage us by telling of the real advantage. Just as the wealthy elder used the power of expedience to bring his mind under control, and afterwards gave to him all of his valuables, the Buddha, in the same way, manifests rare things, but for those who delight in the small, he uses the power of expedience to bring their minds under control, only then teaching the greater wisdom. On this day, we have gained what we never had, that for which we lacked hope, we now have attained. Just as the poor son gained limitless treasure, O world-honored one, now we have obtained the path and its fruits within the non-outflow Dharma. We have gained the eye, pure and clear. During the long night, we maintain the Buddha's pure morality, but only on this day have we gained this reward. In the Dharma King's Dharma, long have we cultivated Brahman conduct. Now we have obtained that non-outflow, the unsurpassed great fruition. Now we are all truly hearers, and taking the sound of the Buddha's way, we cause all to hear it. Now we are all truly arhats, and in all the world, with its gods, people, maras, and brahmas, everywhere among them, we are worthy of receiving offerings. The world-honored one, in his great kindness, uses this rare thing to pity, teach, and benefit us throughout limitless millions of aeons. Who could repay him, giving one's hands and feet, bowing reverently in obeisance, whatever offering one makes, never repays him. If one bores him on one's head, or carried him upon one's shoulder, for aeons as numerous as the Ganges sands, exhausting one's mind in reverence, or further if one used delicacies, and limitless valuable clothing, and all types of bedding, and various medicines, oxhead sandalwood, and various precious gems, or stupas and temples, covering the ground with valuable cloth. And if with such things as these one make offerings, throughout aeons as numerous as the Ganges sands, one still never repays him. The Buddhas are rare indeed, limitless and boundless. Yes, inconceivable is the power of their great spiritual penetrations. Without outflows unconditioned, they are kings of all the dharmas. For the sake of lesser beings, they bear up under this work. To common folks who grasp at mark, they teach what is appropriate. The Buddhists have, within the dharmas, attained to the highest comfort. They understand all living beings, various desires and delights, as well as the strength of their resolve. According to what they can bear, using limitless analogies, they teach them the Dharma in accord with living beings' wholesome roots from former lives. And knowing those who have matured and those who have not yet matured, through such calculations, they discriminate and understand, and in the pathway of one vehicle, they appropriately speak of three.